I'm your host, Aaron Heath, and I'd like to take a moment to thank you for downloading, subscribing, and most importantly, listening to episode 29 of the Gun Rights in Texas podcast. You can find the show notes by going to gunrightsintexas.com/029. Now then, since we are playing around with things, let me just say that I am going to continue the YouTube experiment. So when I run this next little audio clip, keep in mind that you can go to YouTube and you can listen to the show with the show's logo as the video. Now, I am going to experiment. I want to add things to that video. And with this episode, we're going to be doing something new. And I'll talk about that in a moment, but you'll get to see that as part of the YouTube video. So let's go ahead and run the next little audio clip, shall we? The Gun Rights in Texas podcast is available on iTunes, on Stitcher, and in the Microsoft Windows podcast store. Of course, you can always download the show and see the show notes as well as comment by going to the website gunrightsintexas.com. Now, as I said, I am going to continue the YouTube experiment, and one thing I'm going to do with it is I want to include an image for what we're going to be doing next, and that is a Gun of the Show segment. Now, the Gun of the Show segment is going to be where I talk about a gun that I either own, can borrow, or can go to the gun store, look at, and get some images of it for you. And I'll take pictures of it, and I'll include that in the YouTube video. So when I start talking about it, you'll get to have an image of that gun in the video. Now then, let's go ahead and move on to actually talking about the Gun of the Show. And to kind of kick it off, I'm going to start with the Glock 42. Now, the Glock 42 is one that has experienced quite a few changes already in its very short life cycle. The gun was introduced at SHOT Show in 2014, and we're here in October of 2014, and there are already 2 revisions to this gun. So basically, Glock is constantly working to improve it, and I have to say that I own one of the very first versions of it. Now, if I wanted to, I could upgrade this gun to the newest spec without having to modify anything other than swapping out parts. That's the beauty of how Glock designs their guns is, in most cases, the frame and the slide, the barrel, they don't have to be changed out if you want to get to the newest version of your generation. So if you got a Generation 3 that was one of the first production runs and something was changed about it, you should be able to upgrade your first production run Generation 3 Glock to the specs that were used in the last generation or the last run of the 3rd generation. Sometimes the upgrades can be carried across generations, sometimes they can't. However, let me just say that before I go into the specs on the Glock 42, I want to tell you something very honestly. I'm not a Glock fan. Some people say I'm a Glock hater, but that's not true. I like guns, but I'm just not a Glock fanboy, and the Glock fanboys tend to turn me off on the Glocks. However, if I had to carry a 380 and my Sig P238 was not an option, then out of all the different 380s I've shot, which include Rugers, Tauruses, that evil little micro eagle, my friend Ray, that I co-host the Pro Gun podcast, and I'm hoping that we can get around to recording an episode of that later. But his little micro eagle, and there's a few others I've shot in 380, a Walther, little Taurus, not Taurus, the Bodyguard, Smith & Wesson. I've shot that. And in my opinion, the P238 from Sig Sauer is the best of the 380 handguns, the pocket concealable ones, and in a lot of cases, it's better than the larger ones like the Walther. However, if the P238 is not available, the Glock 42 is probably going to be the best option in my opinion. With that said, the specs on this thing are that, of course, as I said earlier, it's a 380. It has a 6-round capacity plus 1 in the chamber. It's a double action only, meaning, well, it's kind of a hybrid between a double action and a single action. And this is called a double action only by the ATF because it's a striker fired. The sights on it, well, they're the standard Glock sights, and they are adjustable if you want to drift the sight. Materials, it's a polymer frame. It's got a steel slide. It weighs 13.76 ounces empty. You can't go wrong with that. And the MSRP is $480. I would mention street price, but when you get right down to it, street price fluctuates, and people will be listening to this podcast maybe as much as a year after I've released it. So I don't want people going and looking up at Bud's Gun Shop. Hey, he said it's XYZ amount, and it's actually about $100 more than that. I don't want that to happen. So I'm not going to mention the street prices or the prices from a certain internet vendor here or there because, well, if I do, then I'm kind of putting myself in a position where I'm going to be giving incorrect information in the future, and I don't want to do that. Now, with that said, that wraps up the Gun of the Show segment, and we're going to move on and move to our topic after this. The Gun Rights in Texas podcast is available on social media. Links to all the social media profiles can be found on the website. On Twitter, the podcast is @GunRightsNTX. On Facebook and Google+, it is Gun Rights in Texas. So please, be social. Alrighty, that takes care of telling you how to get in touch, or not to get in touch, but how to follow the show on social media. And like I said, there's links to all the social media accounts on the website, and that's at the very top of the website even. It's on every page. It's easy to find, so go follow the show on Facebook, Twitter, Google+. Just go follow the show. You'll know when the new episodes are released because I post it there. And I'll be honest, I usually wait just a little bit so that the Stitcher, is it Stitcher? No, it's not. Yeah, it is Stitcher. So that Stitcher gets it in the system, and once they do that, I go ahead and release it. Then I retweet their little tweet about it, and people get to download the show that way. Or if they're a Stitcher listener, they're not pulling up Stitcher, looking for it, and not finding it. So kind of a service I do is I delay announcing it on social media till we have confirmation Stitcher has it in their system. Once that happens, it's fair game, and I announce it to the world. Now, with that said, let's talk a little bit about the upcoming legislative session. For those who have not voted, or for those who, let me think about the best way to put this. Some people do not vote. If you do, this does not apply to you. In fact, you should not even be listening to this podcast because you don't care enough about your gun rights if you don't care enough to vote. However, if you do care enough to listen to this podcast and you do care enough about your gun rights to vote, guess what? Early voting's about to start if it hasn't already. And if you're listening to this, say in November after, is it the 2nd or the 4th this year? But anyways, after Election Day in November, if you're listening to this, sorry, you missed your chance. And like I said, I'm recording this, well, I haven't said it yet, but I'm recording this in pieces. Part of it's being recorded a week even in advance. Some of it's being recorded earlier than that. This is actually, part of this episode's being recorded before the episode I'm about to record, which is the, let me think of the best way to put this. The first episode of the Gun Rights in Texas podcast is being recorded next from part of this. In fact, I'll probably shut this down after I do a little bit of an announcement on what we're planning to do. But let's go ahead and discuss what's going to happen. And if you're listening to this, be sure to go out and vote if you haven't already. So let's take a look at some of the things we can expect to see in the next Texas legislative session as far as the players are concerned. Now, this session, there's going to be more players in the game than there have been in the past, and there are going to be more hostile bills to overcome. Some of the players directly involved in the game will be the NRA, of course, the TSRA, of course. Open Carry Texas has made sure that everybody knows they're going to be a player. And because they're involved, by extension, Gun Owners of America and the National Association for Gun Rights are going to be involved. Open Carry Texas really doesn't matter, in my opinion. Due to their extremist behaviors and actions, and we'll kind of touch on that in a little bit. But because of some of their extremist behavior statements and all of the other BS they've pulled, they have pretty much eliminated any political capital they had. What little they have left is in serious danger itself. Gun Owners of America, the National Association for Gun Rights, really has never done anything positive legislatively. Oh, they'll show you that they did this, they'll show you they did that. But it's always been somebody else that did the work, and they're just moving in and trying to take credit. GOA and NAGR has done nothing to advance gun rights in the state of Texas or at the federal level. And they'll tell you otherwise. They'll tell you the NRA is evil and the NRA is actually a gun control organization, yada, yada. But when you get right down to it, it's the NRA that's making progress and getting things to happen the way that it needs to happen. It's the TSRA that's doing this in conjunction with the NRA in Texas. And, the Second Amendment Foundation is the one that brought the lawsuits known as Heller and McDonald to the Supreme Court. The NRA argued in those cases, and the NRA's arguments were pretty damn persuasive. If you read the briefings and you read the NRA's arguments, you'll see a lot of carryover from the NRA briefings. So if you're going to support somebody on gun rights, don't throw your money at GOA or NAGR. Throw it towards the NRA. Throw it towards the Second Amendment Foundation. If you're in Texas, throw it towards the Texas State Rifle Association. You'll see a lot more return on your investment that way. Now, we're going to move on to the gun banners briefly with Bloomberg's group or groups of choice. This will probably be the Moms Demand Action group because they tend to interact more with Open Carry Texas. They tend to attack them. They tend to get attacked back. So I want to say when it comes right down to it, Moms Demand Action will probably be involved. The Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, another little whack job gun control group, will probably be involved. I'm not really going to talk about them though. They've pretty much relegated themselves to not having any value. But let's get back to groups that are or claim to be pro-gun. And we're going to look at Texas Firearms Freedom as well. Now, Texas Firearms Freedom has some experience in the political realm here in Texas. I don't know that much about them. They popped up on my radar in 2013 during the legislative session. That was the first time I actually noted their existence. And there are some other players that are going to be involved. Texas Carry. Now, Texas Carry is going to be, you never can tell with Texas Carry how they're going to be involved because the leader of Texas Carry, Pastor Terry Holcomb, he's got a pretty big beef with the NRA and the TSRA. But you can almost guarantee he's going to be directly involved in the political game in the next session. Now, as I said earlier, gun rights across America, not gun rights, what did I say? As I said earlier, I looked at their name and I saw gun rights across America and I thought gun owners of America. But gun rights across America, they're going to be involved in the next session. I don't know if they're going to be involved directly or indirectly, but they're going to be involved. More than likely, OpenCarry.org will be involved as well. OpenCarry.org is a group that they've been involved in the last few sessions. Their membership has called legislators, and I won't say it's more of an indirect involvement, but a lot of their antics have hurt Open Carry progress in the past. Why? Because it's been extremist. And when you're dealing with political elements here, extremism doesn't usually work that well. Extremism tends to work better when you're dealing with courts and you got a small, narrow target audience to be on the receiving end of it, because you can convince a small group much easier than you can a massive group. And when you're dealing with politicians, you're trying to convince all of their constituents. Everyone that can vote, that will vote, and might vote is someone that you have to convince to support you. And you get enough of those people convinced, you have that politician in your pocket. You're not paying them. You control their voters. And if you control their voters, you control them. Well, OpenCarry.org has made a point to be a little on the extreme side when it comes to the Open Carry movement, at least in Texas. Another organization is Come and Take It. Come and Take It, to us Texans, that's a very patriotic name. Those of you out of Texas think that's insurrectionist if you're listening to Lad Everett and CSGV and Bloomberg's bunches. But Come and Take It is very patriotic in Texas because it relates to Gonzales and the Gonzales Cannon. Long story, but let's just say that it's patriotic, at least to us Texans. And then you have another group. This may be one of the more extremist groups out there in the Open Carry movement. They really don't care about their political image. They don't care about their public image. They just want you to hear their message. And that's Open Carry Tarrant County. I say that because that's what it looks like on them. Okay, now that I've talked a little bit about who's going to be involved, let's talk about each group on a more detailed basis. Now, when I refer to the NRA in this episode, it's going to more than likely refer to the NRA's Institute for Legislative Action, which is also known as the NRA-ILA. Now, the NRA is the nation's premier firearms training and certification organization that serves this purpose as a nonprofit organization. The NRA created the NRA-ILA in 1975 and expanded it with the Political Victory Fund in 1976. The NRA representative for Texas, to my knowledge, is the only one that lives in one of the states they serve. The NRA does have state-level affiliates, and in Texas, they are associated with the Texas State Rifle Association, who we'll talk about next. Politically, the NRA has enough resources and experience to be a major force anywhere they want to be, and they can contend with anyone in politics. I mean, they may not be able to win every time, but they can sure make a victory painful for the other side. Now, they do have some weaknesses. One of the weaknesses the NRA has is that everybody knows they're going to move against legislation that would hurt their position. So, when you have legislation that runs counter to the NRA's goals, they're going to fight it. If you have a bill that shows up, hey, we're going to do a gun confiscation bill so that the president decides that we have problems with XYZ, he can confiscate all the guns in states that are associated with XYZ. Well, the NRA will fight that. The NRA will actually fight and try to get a law passed that is counter to that says, hey, the president can never confiscate firearms unless he wants to be lined up and, tried after he's out of office or he's impeached. And they'll do something like this knowing that the Constitution already has the impeachment option available simply because it sends a message. If the politicians are willing to ignore the Constitution and go out there and confiscate guns just because they feel like they can, that whole impeachment thing isn't going to mean anything to them. However, passing a law that, hey, I actually had this show up on my desk, I vetoed it, it went back to the legislative body, and they overrode my veto, so now they're sending a message to me, they'll get me. And the NRA will do stuff like that. Now, this means that there are going to be bad bills filed by the opposition just for the sole purpose of making the NRA, and by extension the TSRA, expend political capital fighting them. So, that's the one major weakness the NRA has in politics. Same goes for the TSRA, but that's beside the point. Now, in full disclosure, I am going to say that we have had Charles Cotton, who is on the board of directors for the NRA, on this podcast for episode 10. Now, Charles is a lawyer. He's a very consummate professional, and I'm going to say that when you see Charles discussing something, unless he says that he's discussing it for the NRA, he's discussing his own personal position and opinion. And that's because that's all he can do. He cannot make a decision or make a statement for the NRA without permission from the rest of the NRA. That's part of being a member of the board of directors of an organization of any kind. You cannot make statements for that organization unless you have permission. But like I said, he's been on this podcast. He was on episode 10 when the show was known as the Open Carry Report. So if you want to hear Charles Cotton, a member of the NRA board of directors, talk, that's a good place to go. Now, the TSRA serves as the NRA state affiliate here in Texas. The TSRA's legislative director is Alice Tripp, and she brings enough determination as well as experience in Texas politics to make her a far more effective individual than a normal person could imagine. Now, while she will be working to fight bad legislation, you can rest assured that she will be fighting to move the ball forward as well on gun rights here in the great state of Texas. And I will say, Alice Tripp reminds me of one of my favorite teachers in high school. It's a long story. A lot of people that know this teacher have mixed opinions. However, they will say that you went to her class and you did learn what she wanted you to learn. And the same thing applies to Alice Tripp. She goes to the legislature and eventually she will get what she wants. It may take a while, but they will give her what she wants just because they can't win. And for that reason, I have to say that Alice Tripp has my greatest respect. A lot of that's kind of carried over from the individual that she reminds me of, but a lot of that's carried over from what she's already done for gun rights and for how she has actually advanced them across the board. And like Charles Cotton, Alice Tripp was on episode 10 of this show under the old name. So you can go back to the show notes for episode 10 of the Open Carry Report, which can be found at gunrightstintexas/010 or opencarryreport.com/010. It'll look a little different, but it's still the same website. And you go there, you can listen to the audio, you can see the show notes. I don't think there's much on that episode because it was a roundtable. And you can also see the gentleman you can hear the gentleman from the group that I'm fixing to talk about next, which is Open Carry Texas. Now, Open Carry Texas is a new group here in Texas on the political scene. Now, it has already made itself felt, and it's drawn negative attention from both sides of the gun rights debate. Open Carry Texas is looking to branch out and be a factor in all aspects of gun rights, and not just open carry. C.J. Grisham founded OCT after being arrested while open carrying a long gun on a hike with his son. Well, that particular incident has led to an event called the Hike That Started It All. And this is a commemorative event of CJ's arrest. Yeah, there's no ego there. However, CJ's arrest led to this event. This event is apparently going to be an annual thing with OCT. They've already got the second annual Hike That Started It All planned. And that one is planned for March 14th of 2015 if they don't change their mind. And details on that event can be found on OCT's Facebook page. Just keep checking on it and you'll get an idea if they make changes or if they don't. Now, recently, Open Carry Texas has announced partnerships with Gun Owners of America and the National Association for Gun Rights. And if you have listened to me on any other podcast I have done or do, you'll know that I absolutely 100% do not like either of those organizations. The strong dislike of these organizations goes back much further than my podcasting days. I would go into details, but let me just say, GOA has done nothing. They claim to do a lot. They attack the NRA, and they still get nothing done. Same goes for NAGR, except they are a political attack dog of Dudley Brown. But don't take my word for it. Type in Dudley Brown, NAGR, and type in Second Amendment Foundation, just type in Second Amendment Foundation. You can find a lot of information on the Second Amendment Foundation's website about Dudley Brown, or type in Dudley Brown political hack. That should get you some results. I haven't even done that one, but it should. But type that into your favorite search engine, be it Google, Bing, Yahoo, or whatever, and check out those results. Now, in full disclosure, Victoria Montgomery, and she's a member of OCT's officers. I think she's the communications director. She was on this podcast as a guest, and that was episode 6, and that would still be under the old name of Open Carry Report. And then C.J. Grisham was a guest on the show twice. Episode 10, where we had Charles Cotton and Alice Tripp. He was a guest on that one, and then he was also a guest on episode 16. And all three of those episodes that OCT has had an appearance on is under the old name of Open Carry Report. So let's move on to our gun grabber groups. Like I said, CSGV, they're pretty much not an issue. They don't really have any political capital. Moms Demand Action probably does. And that's just because they went out, stuck their hand in former Mayor Bloomberg's pocket, grabbed a handful of cash, and bought a bunch of political capital. So MDA will probably be involved. They'll probably have plenty of political capital that's bought. That's not to say it's going to be as effective as the earned political capital, but, they're going to be a force to contend with. So Moms Demand Action, led by Shannon Watts, is probably going to be a threat in Texas politics for gun rights. And he may have one or two other groups involved, who knows. But in the end, it's all Bloomberg's money that's going to be involved, and Bloomberg's going to be the one that's wanting results. Now, the good news is that Bloomberg's people do not have that much experience in Texas, at least in Texas politics. But as I said, they do bring his deep pockets to the game, and they bring something else. They bring his media resources, which are quite formidable, to the game. And another problem is they can buy people, and by buy people, I don't mean slavery. I mean they can buy people as in hire them, that they can go out and they can hire the best political experience that's available to them, because money's not an object to Bloomberg. And that's what we have to contend with. Now, another group here in Texas that's going to be an influence, and they're more on the other side of the coin, the pro-gun side, is the Texas Firearms Freedom Group. And I'm moving my show notes down. I'm doing this from the computer. However, Texas Firearms Freedom is led by Rachel Malone, and she has served as the lobbyist for them in the past. Now, I understand that Rachel Malone is the founder and the director of Texas Firearms Freedom. However, I do not know this for a fact. I first heard about them in the 2013 session of the legislature, and I heard about it when Rachel Malone was testifying for House Bill 700, which was an open carry bill that died in committee. Now, Rachel has experience in Texas politics, obviously. How much? I don't know. I really haven't looked into her that much. I have emailed with her when we were setting up the roundtable for episode 16. She had a prior engagement, so she could not be involved in that. However, if I need to, I can get in touch with her. We can discuss things. We can see where they want to go. However, I don't see that being a case right now. When we get closer to the legislative session, that can change. So, Texas Firearms Freedom, they're kind of an unknown factor, although their political capital isn't all that great. Another group that's interesting is Texas Carry. On the surface, they are more politically palatable than a lot of the other participants that are newish in the game. And this is because of a number of different things. First off, their name doesn't come as being a challenge to politicians like Come and Take It's. However, Come and Take It's name really isn't a challenge to politicians. It's more of a patriotic name in Texas. And most legislators will take it that way, even the ones that are not on our side. Why? Because we're Texans. Now, another thing about them is they have not generated a lot of negative PR in the media. Terry Holcomb, he has a history of arrest, but it's always Terry Holcomb that's being arrested. It's not Terry Holcomb, the leader of Texas Carry, being arrested. And that's a distinction. He goes up there, he talks, and he may be given testimony for a bill, and they may say, well, weren't you arrested on such and such day? And somebody will say, hey, that doesn't matter here. It's not a gun rights issue. And guess what? It goes away. So they don't have all the negative PR that Open Carry Texas, some of the Come and Take It crowd, they don't have all that negative PR to deal with. Well, like I said, Terry Holcomb is the leader of not Come and Take It, but Texas Carry. He is a pastor in Texas. And as a pastor, he also kind of invites people to consider the fact maybe he has a little more of a moral standing on the issue. And that's just another advantage that you see from having, you get this advantage because he's a pastor and he's involved in the political efforts. So you have that aspect where some people might say, well, he has a little bit of a moral standing that others may not have. But as I said earlier, he is opposed to the NRA and the TSRA. He has issues with them. And as I said, he does have a history of arrest, including some OC arrest at the state capitol. I think it may just be one, it may be two. I'm not sure. I don't recall. But that does tarnish his standing with politicians a little. And in full disclosure, Pastor Terry was a guest on this podcast for episode 16 under the old name. Now we're going to move on to gun rights across America. This is an unusual group. They seem to have started up because of the issues in Texas. One of the major issues that got them to start up was open carry. However, it seems as if they wish to be a national organization with state-level chapters. As one of the newer political players, Gun Rights Across America suffers from a lack of experience, and they risk being associated with the more radical groups. And when I say they risk being associated with the more radical groups, they do associate with them, they do communicate with them, and they do work with them quite well. However, because they can be seen as less radical by politicians because they don't have any of the negative PR, they may be able to kind of serve as a laundry system, kind of like money laundering, but political capital laundering, where you have them laundering the political capital from groups like Open Carry Texas, Come and Take It, Texas Carry, where they have had some tarnish to their political capital. Maybe Gun Rights Across America can launder that and make it a little more clean and a little more palatable to the politicians. I can't say for sure, but that may be the case. Now, their name allows them to establish credibility on issues other than open carry, which is good. That's an advantage they have that OCT doesn't, even though OCT intends to do more than open carry. And with this next legislative session, maybe they can use the lack of tarnish to their name. Maybe they can use let me think of the best way to put it. maybe they can use the next legislative session to build a real reputation for themselves. Now, Tammy Kuntz, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, she serves as the Texas coordinator for gun rights across America. She was a guest on episode 16 of this podcast under the Open Carry Report name. Now, another organization that we have had on the not on the show, but we have had run-ins in Texas politics with is opencarry.org, also known as OCDO. OCDO has been involved in Texas politics for the last few sessions, albeit indirectly. Now, many see them as a group of bomb throwers, and OCD has actually worked against its own goals with its extremism. At least they have in the past. Well, OCDO has done some innovative things, such as taking out billboards. However, due to some of their extreme tactics and the antics of their followers, they have yet to see any real success, and that's a problem. They get involved, they hurt the issue just by being associated with it. Interestingly enough, groups like Open Carry Texas, Come and Take It, Gun Rights Across America, Texas Firearms Freedom, they make opencarry.org less relevant. In a way, that's bad, and in a way, it's good. It's bad because we have these groups we have no experience with, we don't know what they're going to do, and we don't know how they're going to act. It's good because now they don't have anywhere near the very limited amount of political capital they had before. So they're less of a threat to hurting our side by shooting us in the foot, but at the same time, they really don't do much in the way of advancing things. Now, even though they've done some of the more innovative things in Texas politics, it's sad to say this, but Open Carry Texas has actually done more in Texas politics between sessions than opencarry.org has during the sessions of the legislature. And that's kind of messed up. Now, we got two other groups we want to talk about. I'm saving this one till next to the last because I don't want to touch on them last since I know some of these guys. I've talked to them. I've got one of their members on Facebook. I'll be honest. The Come and Take It crowd, they're a different quantity. Now, they're also known as Katie or Caddy, depending on how you want to pronounce their name. And they're a group of open carry advocates that are associated with the website don'tcomply.com. Their name and their association with Don't Comply steeps them in kind of a... They're kind of portraying themselves with their name and the name of the website that they're associated with. They're kind of being seen as 3%ers. Or if you're familiar with the 3%er movement, it's we're here, only 3% of the people are going to actually participate in a revolution, and we are 3%ers. However, that's not exactly what they're about. Their name is extremely patriotic here in Texas. If you don't understand Come and Take It, I'm sorry. It's a Texas thing. And if you're in Texas and you don't understand Come and Take It, look up Come and Take It and Gonzales, Texas, or the Gonzales Cannon. It's kind of like Molon Lobby and, 300. And really the two statements are the same thing. But like I said, their associations with don'tcomply.com and their name being kind of a rebel rouser feel, or having a rebel rouser feel to it, kind of makes politicians a little hesitant to deal with them. But at the same time, politicians run the risk of being seen as not being patriotic by not dealing with a patriotic named group. And that's really a small risk, but it's still a little bit of a risk here in Texas. Now, in full disclosure, James Franklin from Come and Take It was a guest on episodes 3 and 7 of this podcast under the old name. And he was a guest on the he was a guest on the Pro Gun podcast as a guest co-host. And God, that was a while back. That was almost a year ago. However, the last group I want to talk about, and I want to talk about them last because these are the real radicals in the open carry movement that their very presence is going to do harm. And that is Open Carry Tarrant County, also known as OCTC, kind of like R2D2 on crack. Now, they started out as a chapter of Open Carry Texas, and thus the Open Carry part of their name. However, they broke away from OCT when the two groups disagreed on tactics and, general PR-related stuff in the Arlington area. Now, the separation has allowed OCTC to take on an even more radical approach than Open Carry Texas has. At the same time, OCTC can claim results that few other groups can. You see, they have successfully sued the city of Arlington, Texas, in federal court over the passing out of literature, and they won that case. However, OCTC President Corey Watkins is involved in many activities that bring him into contact with law enforcement, such as Cop Watch. Corey Watkins has a number of different issues, such as arrest for interfering with police duties, although that may or may not be the case. The videos I've seen tend to support his side. However, you can tell the videos don't show the whole story, so we can't be sure what's going on there. However, his arrest tarnished his political standing, and because he's being reported as Corey Watkins, the president of Open Carry Tarrant County, he is basically, when he gets arrested for something else, he's tarnishing the group's name. And a lot of people involved in the open carry movement see an arrest as being kind of a civil rights thing. You're fighting for civil rights, you're going to get arrested. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with the politicians, and I'm still getting tongue-tied here, you run into problems such as, am I really helping the cause? Because now the politicians see an arrest record, where they see that I have been arrested. So do they really want to work with me and risk having their name tarnished by my arrest record? That's a problem that any of these people that have been arrested in the open carry movement deal with when they go to the politicians. And with that said, I'm going to play a little clip real fast, and then we'll be right back with the news. If you want to contact the podcast, please send email to aaron@gunrightsintexas.com. Or you can leave a comment on the webpage, which is gunrightsintexas.com. However, if you want to leave a voicemail and be featured on the show, then please do so by dialing 409-292-6736. And now we're going to move into the news. In the crime report section, we have quite a few stories. Oh boy. Well, an argument at the Lone Star College in North Harris County. It was between two individuals, and my show notes kind of got mangled. However, an argument at the Lone Star College in North Harris County between two individuals ended with 3 people receiving non-fatal gunshot wounds. 2 individuals were involved in the argument. Both pulled handguns and proceeded to shoot at each other. One suspect was shot by the other and taken to the hospital, and the other suspect fled the scene. However, if I'm not mistaken, according to the article, both suspects have been arrested, and they expect this one to be wrapped up pretty quick, apparently. Now, the former owner of Garrett's Gun Vault in Victoria, Texas, pled guilty to possessing an unregistered short-barrel shotgun. During the raid, which found the illegal short-barrel shotgun, federal agents found 117 firearms that were not properly logged into the bound book. Now, what led to this particular raid is the fact that customers had been bringing firearms into this guy for gunsmithing, and then they were having a hard time getting their guns back. And after enough complaints, authorities got involved. They raided him. They found the illegal unregistered short-barrel shotgun, which, if you ask me, that should not be a crime. There should not be any requirement to register a rifle, a shotgun of any kind, much less a short one. I mean, there's less gun there. It's not as powerful because there's not as much energy being fired because the barrel's not as long. Or if it's got a short stock, it's not as capable, or it's not as comfortable. It's not, well, as you shorten a firearm, you make it either less powerful or you make it, you're making it less ergonomic in a lot of cases. There are exceptions to this, like bullpups, like my FS 2000 from FNH USA. It's kind of an exception to that. It's got a 16-inch barrel. It's still a pretty short gun. I could have it easily converted to a short-barreled rifle. It wouldn't take much. And I could probably have it done relatively easily. So while I disagree with the fact that the crime he's charged with should not be a crime, this guy was a bad guy, and we got to weed out the bad ones in our own community. However, let's move on to one that's a little closer to my area. Now, you've heard me in the past say that Andrews, Texas, and even Midland and Odessa are my backyard. And if that's the case, then Lubbock, Texas, which is where our next story comes from, it's in my front yard. And you may be wondering, why would Lubbock be in my front yard if Midland, Odessa, and Andrews are in my backyard? Well, It's about the same distance to Odessa from where I work as it is to Lubbock from where I live. Now, in Lubbock, a woman was found to be injured when police were called out the second time in one day regarding gunshots at a party. Now, the first time they were out there, no one was injured, and when police went out the second time, they learned that 3 men had fled the scene in a Chevy Impala. Now, apparently these men fled the scene after the woman had been injured, and the woman was hospitalized for non-life-threatening injuries. Later, the 3 men were arrested after they had fled the scene, but they were arrested. Now, in Forney, Texas, 3 suspects were arrested with 2 stolen vehicles, a stolen firearm, and other stolen property was recovered in that particular investigation. Now, it was a police response to a burglary of a vehicle call that led to the arrest and the recovery of the property. Now, looking at the article, this incident seems to be the end of a string of burglaries in Forney, and the burglaries ranged from vehicle burglaries to habitation burglaries. So these guys were not very discriminatory in what they burglarized. Now, the article mentions a possible charge of organized criminal activity, which would seem to indicate at least one more person was involved in the crimes, if not more, because in Texas, organized criminal activity requires 4 people be involved in the crime in order to have that particular charge. So, while the investigation may have wrapped up this burglary string, there may still be others out there that they're looking for, they have warrants for, who knows. The article doesn't go into details on that, so we're going to kind of wrap that up and move on to the politics in the news section. We've got one of those, and I put this in politics rather than criminal activity or miscellany because you can almost guarantee that this one's going to have political implications. The Pittsburgh, Texas. Yeah, you heard that right, Pittsburgh, Texas. The Pittsburgh, Texas Independent School District was placed on lockdown after the FBI contacted local law enforcement regarding a possible shooting threat. Now later, it would be determined that the threat was for a school with a similar name and not the Texas district. Armed faculty and staff are the solution to school shootings. And if you have an armed facility, and by an armed facility, I mean you have people that are carrying firearms for defense of their selves and those around them, you are far less likely to experience a mass shooting. However, this particular story is all California craziness, apparently. And I'll have a link in the show notes so you can go there and view them. Now, we got a few stories I threw into the miscellany category, so let's go ahead and do that. First off, the Alamo is hosting the Firearms of the Texas Frontier Flintlock to Cartridge 1836 to 1876 interactive exhibit. Now, the exhibit will showcase single-shot firearms like those used at the Alamo during the siege that made the site famous. To me, that would just be cool to go see. I wish I could take off work and do it, but you know what? I don't have the time. I don't have the resources to do it, so I guess I won't get to. But let me say, that's an excellent way to go and learn about some of the older firearms. And anybody that knows me knows that I love the old firearms. And this next story hits close to home. And it hits close to home because of a number of reasons. Midland County Sheriff's Deputy Mike Naylor was killed while he was in the process of serving a warrant at the home of a suspected sex offender. I haven't touched about that news story. I'm not going to, but I am going to say he was laid to rest in Hobbs, New Mexico on Tuesday. That would be Tuesday, October 14th of 2014. And I just happened to have the honor of watching his funeral procession as it passed where I work during my lunch hour. Now, the loss of Mike Naylor is unfortunate, and it serves to remind us that every day law enforcement officers do put their lives at risk by simply doing their job. Some people may dislike police because they represent the authority of the government, or maybe they've had a bad experience with officers. However, these guys go out there, they put their life on the line, and not all of them are bad. In fact, the vast majority of them are not bad people. But yes, you do have a few bad apples, and people tend to focus on the bad apples and ignore the good ones. However, as the host of this podcast, and this podcast is the Gun Rights in Texas podcast, I ask that you say thank you to the next peace officer that you see. I mean, I don't mean chase them down in their car while they're on patrol. I mean, you see them at the convenience store, you see them at the restaurant, or they come into where you work because they need something or something like that. Just say thank you for doing that job and putting their, accepting the risk for society. A vast majority of these people, they're just like me and you. They're not going to stand in lockstep and fight to take our guns away. Most of these people here in Texas, they're on our side, at least when it comes to gun rights. So say thank you to these guys for doing a job that society needs and a job that can result in the loss of their life. Now, with that said, let me say I do want to say thank you to all the law enforcement out there. I have a lot of friends in law enforcement. I know a lot of people may think that's a conflict of interest, but it's not. A lot of these guys I've known since they were in high school. A lot of them I've known from official contacts because of where I work or something going on. So let me just say thank you to everyone involved in law enforcement here in Texas for risking your life to do a job that is obviously not getting enough thanks. And to those people and everybody else listening to the show, stay safe and carry responsibly. Stay tuned after the music and you'll hear the new to Guns in Texas portion if you're not interested in hearing about something very basic. And in this case, it's going to be how to get some very basic training cheap. If you want to hear that, stick around. After the music, I'll discuss that. And if you don't want to hear it, when the music hits, the show's over for you. Thank you for listening to the Gun Rights in Texas podcast. Please leave a review on iTunes or send feedback to the host. Your input will be used to improve the show. Stay safe and please carry responsibly. All right, then, let's move on and wrap the show up with the new to Guns in Texas segment. Now, this segment, I chose to touch on something that's actually available in all 50 states, Canada, and other places too. And that is cheap, basic, and strongly recommended firearms instruction with hunter's education. For the uninitiated, a cheap course that teaches some very basic information about firearms is worth far more than the cash price. And interestingly enough, there are some very budget-friendly options available. And these options are available in the form of hunter's education. If you plan to hunt, you will most likely find that a hunter's education class is a requirement in order to hunt, in order to get a hunting license. And, this is for the people that are new to firearms in Texas. And the reason I say that is most people that are new to firearms were born after the date that you have to have it in order to be able to hunt. Now, there is an option for a one-time, 1-year deferral of hunter's education. After that, though, you got to have it, or at least in Texas. Well, hunter's ed it's going to teach you the basics of hunting or some basic knowledge for hunting. It's going to teach you some basic knowledge for firearms, such as where's the primer in the cartridge, what's the case, what's the bullet, what are the 4 rules of firearms safety, like we discussed on the last episode in the New to Guns in Texas segment. All of that is available in hunter's education. It's all covered. In Texas, you can get the hunter's education class for as little as $15 if you look hard enough. $15, you have a chance to network with other people that may be new to gun rights or gun ownership. You have a chance to network with somebody that is an instructor. They may just be an instructor for this, but there's a very good chance they can link you up with an instructor for other things too, if they're not themselves. And you learn some very basic and very useful knowledge, especially when it comes to firearms and hunting. But like I said, you can get this for as little as $15 in Texas. Now, some instructors may charge a little more to cover things such as range or classroom fees. However, if you go to the Texas Department or the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, you can find far more information and links to the classes and other resources there. So if you're new to firearms in Texas, even if you don't plan to hunt, I still recommend getting that hunter's ed. It's cheap, and the knowledge it gives you will stick with you. You never can tell. After you take the class, you might decide, maybe I do want to try this hunting thing. And when you decide to do that, all you got to do is go up, get your hunting license, and link up with somebody that already has land to hunt or find land to hunt yourself. But please, when you hunt, take a buddy with you.